Mr. Clark, what you're touching on now leads me to ask, what is the purpose of this legislation in Connecticut? Your basic argument in your brief, and so far in your oral argument, is that this is well within the so-called police power of the state of Connecticut. And what is its purpose?
Well, if Your Honor, please, I think its purpose is
to increase the population of Connecticut, or to impair its decrease, or is it what?
If Your Honor, please, I do not hold that it is to increase the population of Connecticut. I don't think that this is we could make this claim valid.
So what is it? What is the purpose?
I think it's to reduce the chances of immorality, if Your Honor, please, and I use the words immorality here in a broad sense. That is, in one way, to act as a deterrent to sexual intercourse outside of the marital relationship.
Well, the trouble with that argument is that on this record, this involves only married women.
That is correct, Your Honor.
So how can you make that argument?
Well, if Your Honor, please, I think that on this record, that the statute is a valid exercise of police power.
Well, for what purpose?
And if Your Honor, please, on this record, that there is a distinction, and there has to be a distinction between birth control and the use of contraceptives. That is to say that all contraceptives involve birth control. But in order to practice so-called birth control, one does not have to use contraceptives. And that the state is able to take this position and take this distinction. That there are, if it be said, well, should married people be allowed to use these devices?
Yeah.
Is not the state going too far? I think the state can answer to that there are other methods available to married people.
Well, now, for what purpose under its police power? Assuming we're dealing now with married couples.
Well, if Your Honor, please, going back, Connecticut in the Nelson case cited the Byrne case in New York. And one of the reasons cited by the Connecticut court and the Byrne case was that it would not be, as a matter of fact, it would not be improper for the legislature to consider that Connecticut, as any state, has a right to look out for its own continuation. This is the population argument. I personally am not too happy with it. But
well, what argument are you happy with?
I think, if Your Honor, please, the only argument that we can honestly say is that this is a question of pure power.
Well, do you suppose the state of Connecticut could prevent marriage?
I think the state of Connecticut could prevent marriage on certain people, certain groups. Yes, if Your Honor, please. Between idiots, say, or age in marriage, I think, if Your Honor, please, that...
But surely you'll agree with me they couldn't... I should think you'd agree with me that the state of Connecticut should say there'll be no marriages contracted in this state. Be no sexual intercourse of any kind, married or unmarried.
I agree with you.
Well, now, what is the police power purpose of Connecticut in telling married people, two people who are married to each other, that they cannot use contraceptives?
Well, I think, if Your Honor, please, it's to preserve...
what kind of morality? What moral purpose is
well,
that?
If Your Honor, please, it is not unheard of that the use of contraceptives themselves would be immoral. Certainly, this is a view that has been prevalent in history right up to the last few years in most groups. In Connecticut, I'm citing the brief of our opponents in one instance of the number of Catholics and Orthodox Jews in the state. If you were just to put it on a numerical basis,
well, you'd have quite a different case if the state of Connecticut compelled all married couples to use them. That's not. That's when you'd run into the argument you're now making, that this violates the religious precepts and beliefs of certain groups.
This is true, but if Your Honor, please, it also would be more difficult for the state to control the result of what you might call dissolute action. That is, fornication and adultery. That's what it's there.
Well, I thought you and I had agreed that isn't involved here. We're dealing here with, by definition, and on this record, with advice and the furnishing of devices to married women who ask for such advice.
Well, Your Honor, please, I think what we have here, that is true. We have here a center being used, and the witnesses that the state used in this case were, in fact, 3 married women.
Mr. Clark, inquiry, on page 15 of your brief, I don't know that I agree, but if you might provide an answer by reading what your court said in State versus Nelson. Doesn't sound like a very lofty attribution to married people, but that's the reason your court assigned. Page 15, State versus Nelson. You look at the next to the last paragraph.
Your Honor, please, that's what I was trying to get out, and I must say that I did it rather poorly.
That is the reason your state, I take it, assigns that morals are involved.
That is correct, Your Honor, please. The court held in Nelson, it, meaning the legislature, was not precluded from considering that not all married people were immune from temptations or inclinations to extramarital indulgence. And I think, if Your Honor...
That is the moral ground, then, upon which presumably your court has sustained this legislation under the police power.
I think it is.
That's the ground on which you're relying.
That is correct.